Welcome to CTC's webinar today. We're going to be talking about one of our newest Civil Express tools, Pipe Designer. My name is Kyle Groves. I'm an application engineer with CTC, and I'm really excited to talk to you all about this. I had a big hand in getting this tool developed, and we are very proud of it. So we're happy to give everybody a deeper look at how this is going to work. So CTC writes our Express tools because our clients come to us and they say, hey, we love the software, but we really wish that it could do this. And most of it's not about doing things that Civil 3D or Revit can't do already. We're not rewriting the software. We're just making it easy to access workflows and settings. So the problem is that even though pipe networks, when they're done, look great and they help us out with our design and our drafting, but they are a nightmare to modify to get them to look the way that they're supposed to and to get them designed inside Civil 3D. To review, if we're using our pipe networks and we want to modify them, we can go to our properties palette. Maybe we want to check the item view, that bottom half of our tool space. We can open up the pipe networks vista and look at all kinds of stuff. We'd go into the part properties, but we're bombarded with all kinds of information here on our pipes and on our structures, and very little of this is easy to access or telling us what it is we're trying to design, and it just gets so frustrating. And that's why CTC came up with the Pipe Designer Express tool, because it allows us to edit multiple pipes and structures and their properties using a spreadsheet-style editor inside of Civil 3D. So before we go any further, I'm just going to review why people use pipe networks and why CTC thinks that you should be too. In a nutshell, pipe networks, their structures, and their pipes are basically like 3D smart blocks. So they've got attributes. What's the inner diameter, the outer diameter, the thickness? What elevation am I starting and ending at? All of this stuff gets defined to these individual, I don't want to call them smart blocks. And since they're Civil 3D objects, it means they're dynamic. So they automatically update our labels and our tables for us, and they properly display in profile and section views. So when we make a change to our design, we don't have to redraw the same ellipse 500 times for each one of our section views. Now that that's out of the way, get into what we're going to talk about for the rest of today. I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of the tool. This is what it looks like. It's a dialog box that pops up inside Civil 3D, and it is indeed a fully functioning spreadsheet editor. And then we're going to talk about some workflows. We're going to go through existing conditions, how we can get our existing pipe networks set up pretty quickly. And then we're also going to look at some stuff with our proposed conditions. So with that, the overview of the tool. What is Pipe Designer? Well, it's a spreadsheet editor inside of Civil 3D. When we launch the tool, we're executing a Civil 3D command. We have the option to copy, paste, drag fill, do all the things that we could do inside a normal spreadsheet editor. We can undo, we can redo, we can change all of our design options. And when we hit apply or OK, we're right back inside the drawing and we can see our updates in real time. So as we can see up by the top, we've got a couple of buttons. Do we want to look at something else? Do we want to look at a different part of the drawing? And then we've got a few different radio buttons for our design method. So we could go by invert, or we could go by slope. And we can set up these different parameters for what we can edit and what we cannot. And when we're done with this, it's going to directly modify the properties of our structures and our pipes inside Civil 3D. But we're gonna look at all this stuff in a little bit more detail as we go through the workflows. Want to get into Civil 3D here quickly. So our first workflow is for our existing conditions. We go out, we have our survey team collect at least, hopefully, the rim, the invert or the measure down distance away from the rim, and then the direction of those pipes inside these stormwater structures. We take that information and we create pipe network parts inside of our drawing, and then we'll use Pipe Designer to quickly modify those part properties so that they match our survey data and we have an accurate model. That being said, let's head into the software. So this is our site. Some of you may recognize it, but we've got a little subdivision going on in this big lot. We're going to put some stuff over here and possibly in some of these corner lots. We've got our access roadway drafted in, and there's even a little intersection. I'll just go ahead and point out that this roadway starts along this east side of our site, goes uphill to the curve, and then downhill to the north. This proposed roadway at this intersection then goes downhill to the west, away from the intersection. And then on the west side of our site, we've got this other small access road with our surveyed design information. Now, this could come in a few different forms, whether it's a full-on Civil 3D survey point or COCO point, or if it is just multi-liters and blocks, which is what is XREF'd in this case. So we've got our information, it's in our drawing, and then it's time to modify our network. So I've actually got this network predefined. A lot of our customers actually have started going toward this predefine your networks in your template so that your layers are all set up and ready to go. Just had a question come in. Is Pipe Designer compatible with 18? Yes, it is compatible with 18. It is compatible with 17. And I believe it may also be compatible with 16. I will follow up on that with you all. But yes, it definitely does work in 18. And as someone noticed, I am using 19 right now. We're going to go through and we need to modify this network. I'm going to just confirm, I'm going to put the structure labels down just for the names. We're using the right parts list, referencing the correct surface, get these going to the right layers. You know what? That's okay. We'll get the picture. I was doing that in my other file. And I'm just going to reset the counters for the naming as these get applied. So let's get these parts drawn in. These are all going to be 48-inch catch basins, and oh my, that's not where I wanted that to go. 48-inch catch basins with 18-inch concrete pipe. And I'm just going to snap to my multi-liters via the XREF, because I know that those are pointed in the right spot. Oh, and actually, I have managed to draw these kind of out of order. I want this one to snap over here. So we'll get that in, but it doesn't matter, because I'm just going to come back and I am going to modify those values right out of Pipe Designer so everything's flowing in the right direction and managing all of that. Another thing that I did not focus on, and I will hammer this home again when we get to the proposed conditions, this toggle upslope downslope button is supposed to be really important when we're drawing our pipe networks, because it makes a big difference on how these are going to behave in Civil 3D, if we do any analyses on them, and even when we bring it into storm and sanitary analysis. If you use Pipe Designer correctly, it doesn't matter what this button is set to. Pipe Designer will make sure that that is all working in the correct upstream, downstream order. So now that I've got these structures in my drawing, I'm going to run the tool. So that's up here in the Civil Express Tools ribbon and tab, Pipes panel, and it's the Pipe Designer option. I'm going to recommend, I've found it to be a little bit easier when we're doing these existing conditions to do your laterals first, and then come back and do the trunk line after you're all done, and that'll become clear. But all I'm going to do here, I launch the tool, I've got this all looking right, and I'm going from 16 to 17. That's supposed to be downhill. So I've got my invert on structure 16. That is, switch over here to the invert design method. So invert 1, that's attached to 16. That's going to be 810.59. Tab over, just like a spreadsheet. And invert 2 is what's tying me here into structure 17, which is this west invert, so 809.21. I'm going to go back and also modify my invert for the structure of number 16. Here in Minnesota, it gets real cold, so typically we don't see sump values. For the rest of this presentation, I'm going to be attempting to hit a 0 sump for all of my structures. So now that I'm done, I can hit apply. If I wanted to, I could reselect and keep going on down the line, but I'm actually going to escape out so that I can confirm that structure 16 really does have the elevation that I assigned to it, and it does. And the pipe, it's starting invert, 810.59, check. Ending invert, 809.21, also check. So great, the tool does work. It's assigning these, it's writing these properties to those parts. So let's keep on going. If I don't like my zoom state while I'm working inside the tool, since it's not modeless, I can't zoom around or anything. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use this zoom in drawing, and this is going to take me straight to the zoom command with the window subcommand. If I don't like what that presents to me though, I can also just zoom in and then pan and scroll around to wherever I'm content. And when I hit escape, it'll keep that view state. So now here for structure 19, this is going to be invert 1, invert 2. And notice that I'm doing my inverts first of my pipe before I do my structure. And that is because the way that pipe networks function, the invert of your structure cannot be above the invert of your lowest pipe. So when we do our pipes first, it allows us to then come back and give a proper elevation to the structure. So right now when I say invert of 21 at 812.48, even if I hit apply, which you don't have to do, I could just hit OK, and then I'll go back into the drawing. I'll come back to the structure. My elevation for my sump hasn't gone up because I haven't actually redefined anything about my pipe. And that's how pipe networks are supposed to work, and Pipe Designer respects that. So the west invert of the right structure, 812.26, 812.48. And I'm leaving the invert for structure 20 alone because I'm going to pick that up when I do my trunk line, which the time is now. Also too, when I'm selecting these pipes, as long as it's a straight line in between, which, well, it has to be, it's going to pick up on those for me. So I don't have to click each individual part that I'm going to modify. I only have to pick my end parts. So here on structure 17, my south invert, that's invert 1. And now I'm looking at the north invert of structure 18. Now I can bring my invert for the structure of 17 where it's supposed to be. And keep on moving. So now I want the south of 18, that's 810.98. Also too, folks, pay attention to this drop column as I'm moving along here, and watch how these cells in gray, my drop, sump, slope, those are going to update because I can't modify these values directly. These gray cells are locked to the user because they're using the rest of the cells to actually do the math. And as such, I actually don't have to come through here and manually type in my invert for my sumps, or my invert for my structures, I can just change my calculation method to tell it that I'm going to manually input my sump depth. Now these are going to get calculated automatically. And when I change my sump to 0, my invert is simply my lowest pipe minus my sump. So now these two values match. So we'll just breeze through here and get the rest of these in. And 81454. All of these have updated. I hit OK. It applies all the changes to my drawing, and I can verify that quickly with my properties palette. Our sump is at 814.54, exactly as our surveyor called it out, and I'm done. I now have a fully functioning pipe network for my existing conditions, which is pretty cool. And it did not take me that long. So, what about the proposed conditions? Well, we're going to start off in a pretty similar fashion. We're going to place our networks in plan view. And since this is now the design phase, it's also pretty helpful to have these around in a profile view as well. Depending on how you like to look at things, maybe this is the center line of your roadway, or maybe you create a new alignment based off of your network parts so that you're not messing with any sort of distortion for being 20 feet away at -2% or things of that nature. Once we get that done, we're going to use Pipe Designer to design our trunk line, or basically whatever critical points that we have to do to get everything in the first time. And then we're going to design our laterals and make sure that we don't have any, sunken inlets on the downslope side of a roadway that is going to affect the design of our trunk line. At which point we'll go back and double check our design. And this is an iterative process, so we'll have to go back and make any tweaks or changes that we have to see. So with that, let's head back into the software. And got another question here. Again, folks, the Pipe Designer and most of our all of our Civil Express tools do go back to 2018. Most go to 17, and then back then into 16 and 15, we haven't implemented full backwards compatibility for that yet. But yes, everything that you see here in 19 is available in the 18 version. And with that too, 2018 and 2019 files are backwards compatible, or forwards compatible. So if I were to open a file in 2019 that was created in Civil 3D 2018, I'm not even prompted with a warning about whether or not this file was saved in a previous version of the software, and vice versa. If I open a 19 file in 18, I'm not getting a warning about being saved in a future version of the software. So for Civil 3D users that have been around for a while, that's reminiscent of how things worked in between 14, 15, and 16. Back to the demo. We've got our proposed conditions. I've got two pipe networks, one running along my east-west roadway. Well, technically it's the same network, but with different inlet and outlet points. And then I've got another network running along the north side of my roadway. I have also got some profile views already set up, and I'm going to split my screen into different viewports so that we can take a look at those. This is the profile on the left here. This is the one along my center line of my roadway, but since I want a true representation of my network, this structure on the far left is actually this catch basin in the northeast corner of this line, because that's the farthest away and the most upstream point. And I'm going to come down to this manhole and out to my last designed structure. So I can see here in my profile view that this is a terrible stormwater design. I'm going uphill in some points. I have sunken pipes in the middle of my run. This is just not going to work. And before I actually go any farther and run back into Pipe Designer, I want to show one more trick that I've got in place here, and that is this salmon-colored profile that looks to be very similar to my design profile in blue, and that's because it is. I've created a new surface that I don't have showing in my plan view, but all it is, it's my pipe network minimum cover, and I took my surface that came out of my corridor, my FG surface, and I lowered it by 3 feet. And those are just done right here by right-clicking on the definition for edits, paste the surface, and then lower the surface. So now I have a dynamic visual representation of how low I need all these pipes to be. And I can see that I am indeed at least 3 feet underneath, but I'm cutting it pretty close here at structure 3, my manhole, near station 200 of my east-west road. So with that, let's go ahead and let's grab these parts. One of the great things about Pipe Designer is that it's going to pick up on the parts that I pick, whether they're in plan or in profile. And notice that these have all highlighted for me. The other thing I mentioned previously, that whole draw these parts in order of upslope or downslope, we don't have to worry about that anymore. And since I picked from structure 7 up to structure 14, and also to these plan and profile are flipped, in case some of you were a little confused, I'm moving upstream, so these slope values are positive. If I reselect my pipe run in the opposite order, now my slopes are negative. So Pipe Designer is picking up on that, and it will let us write those values out so that it will take care of it for us. So I mentioned before, I've got design methods. I've got invert-based designs, and I can toggle which of my cells are gray or white. And I can also go by slopes. So the first thing that I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set my invert for my first pipe. 817.69, that's kind of a weird number. So we're going to drop that down to, or up to 817.7 and design it to the 10th. And I want my profile view to update for me though, so that I can watch this happen. So I'll hit apply. And that was a pretty small change, but it has indeed updated. Now that I've got my starting point set, I can simply run over to the slopes design method, assign a -0.5% slope, and this is a spreadsheet editor, so I can just drag that value down and hit apply. Uh-oh. So one of the things that Pipe Designer will inform us of is if we make our pipes too high on our stormwater structures, since we can't have our pipes coming into the bell of our structures, the solution that Civil 3D comes up with is to move our rims above our reference surface and therefore break that dynamic link. We don't want that to happen. So this is telling me that if I do that, straight -0.5% slope across these pipes, structure 1 is going to get picked up. So I need to be a little bit steeper. So I'm going to say, no, don't continue. Let's try -1.5 and see how that works. And indeed, we do. But all this really did is that I don't care what your starting inverts and ending inverts are, just make sure the difference between them is 1.5. And that's not really what we want with this jagged design. So I also need to go through and make sure that my drop values and my sump values are where they're supposed to be. So if I change my drop to the standard 0.1 for both of these, I've now got my inverts matching across because that's the design method that I have currently chosen. And then I will also just Control-C, Control-V to get my sump values set to 0. Not going to worry about this 100th, but I could reset it if I wanted to. and this is looking pretty good. But I don't always want to match my inverts. Sometimes I want to match my crowns. I get a little bit better hydrologic behavior when I do that. So when I switch to designing by slope by matching my crowns, I get a new column available to me. This is the matching factor. So when I'm going from an 18-inch, all of these pipes have a 6-inch difference in their diameter. So what this is saying, actually I'll hit apply here with it at 1, and we can see that our crowns are now matching crown to crown with that 0.1 drop. And that's because this factor is set to 1. So the extra space, that 6 inches, is represented, all currently is going beneath the smaller pipe, the incoming pipe. So if I were to change this to, say, 0.5, that's going to say that half of that 6 inches is going to be below my incoming pipe, and the other half is going to be above. Well, at this point, I'm basically matching center lines. If I really wanted to, I could set that to 0, and now I'm matching inverts, but that's kind of silly because I already have a button that does that. So we'll go ahead and we'll use the 2/3 rule and say that we want 2/3 of this space to be underneath our smaller pipe and the last third to be above it. So we're still kind of discharging fully into the bigger pipe, but we're mostly on the high side of the center line. And I've gone through and I've designed my trunk line. So this all looks fantastic. I'm actually going to just give us a little shallower slope so that our next design situation makes sense. Drag that on down. Oh, my drops got messed up there. There we go. So now that I've designed my trunk line, I need to go back and I need to make sure that my laterals are all still behaving correctly. I notice here by structure 4, my south side of the street has a longer pipe, so this one's going to be more critical. And now it's time to come and check this out. So these are 12-inch pipes in between. My rim is at 821, and I need 3 feet of cover. So "12-inch pipe." So my sump has to be at least 817.15. So let's make that change. Go back over to invert. But I've got a positive slope. That's not going to fly. I need this to now come back and be at least minus 0.5, which is going to push my structure invert for number 4 down to 816.12. I'm going to undo that real quick. So I have to have that at 816.12, and it's at 815.21. So I actually don't have to change my trunk line design at all. But if I did, one more thing before we wrap up, is when I've got my structures here in Pipe Designer, if I have a critical junction, like I did right here at number 4, when I'm designing by slope, matching inverts, I can actually right-click on a structure and flip its locking mechanism. So since this cell is white, no math is going to act on it. And now I can rest assured that as long as I don't change this value, it's not going to change. So I can now have a little bit of drop between my pipes upstream and downstream, and everything's going to keep flowing downhill. So that's all for the demo portion. In conclusion, what does Pipe Designer do for us? It allows us to design and modify our pipe networks in a human way, in the way that we think about these systems when we're actually designing them. We do this with a spreadsheet editor, and it's inside Civil 3D. Pipe Designer allows us to go back and forth between multiple design methods, and we can change them at any time inside the tool. Pipe Designer significantly speeds up creating our model for both our proposed and our existing conditions, so that these things are going to display correctly in our profile views and in our section views. And lastly, Pipe Designer works in plan and in profile view, so we're not locked to just looking down at this with the bird's eye. I want to thank everybody for watching today, and with that, we're going to end the webinar.